Each year as we gather on this occasion of our pro-life conference for our diocese, we perhaps wonder, what have we accomplished during the past year? What good have we really done? How successful have we really been? And it is pretty easy to try to come up with some kind of measure of success or measure of accomplishment. And it would be nice if there was a chart, one of these thermometer bubbles that, you just have a line and you keep raising the line to see how much success we are having. And yet, the real measure of success must rest almost solely in the measure of our own integrity, in the measure of our own doing the will of the Father, in our own fidelity to the gospel and in our faithfulness to life. That's the only thing that any one of us can measure. And it would be a mistake to measure success or failure by any other standard in terms of our individual, personal, spiritual lives. Am I striving to advance and grow in holiness? And is this apostolate, this mission, a part of my doing the will of the Father? Is this work a part of my fulfilling what God has called me to do? Because if I am doing that, then I'm advancing and growing in holiness, as manifested in that faithfulness and perseverance. I think the readings today give us, in some ways, that same message. St. Paul, in writing to Timothy, he begins his letter. And St. Paul is very quick in recognizing that he's going to give advice to Timothy. It's very quick to recognize that he needs to acknowledge his own unworthiness to give that advice, to acknowledge his own faults, flaws, shortcomings, and his own sinfulness. He says, I can talk to you about these things because I have received great mercy from God, because among sinners I was the greatest. And it gave Paul, in his relationship to Timothy, a genuine heart of compassion, and could call Timothy to greater faithfulness and perseverance precisely because St. Paul knew what it was to be proud and arrogant and on the wrong road. He knew what it was to be somehow shaken by God and then picked up by God and dusted off and said, now, get on the right road, but always in accord with my will, not yours. And so there's a strong note of humility that St. Paul brings to that message in acknowledging his own unworthiness. He knows that if he listens to the Gospel of Luke, that if it was his fruit that was being produced, it would be pretty ugly fruit. It would be bad fruit because of his own sinfulness. But if that fruit comes from a tree which is rooted in the Lord, if it comes from a house which has a deep and lasting foundation in the Lord and in truth, then the house will be strong and the fruit will be good. Not because the builders are good and not because we are good, but because God is good and God is merciful. And if we strive more fully and wholeheartedly to do His will, then that fruit that it produces will likewise be good. For us, in terms of our work, and there is so much work to be done, so much educating to do. And I really think more and more that education in this area is so important. Those of you who read my column know that I wear the little pro-life feet, the 10-week feet. And I was in line in an airport at Los Angeles, and 3 businessmen who looked to be fairly savvy, although they were teasing each other about whether or not they had time to go to confession in this line while we were waiting for security. I assured them the line was not long enough. But one of them said, "Well, what's that? What's that pin?" And I said, "Well, that's the little feet of a 10-week-old fetus." And they looked at me, all three of them, really puzzled, and said, "Really? I never knew that. Did you know that?" How long has that message been around? How bright are we in terms of science? And yet these three professional businessmen had no idea that a fetus after 10 weeks of development actually had human distinguishing features. It was news to them. Now, how could it be news to them? I don't know, but it was. And it just reassured me that we do need to teach ever more clearly and consistently and with the most fundamental basics, because a goodly number of people never make the connection between the child growing in the womb and a real human person. And we can help make that connection little by little, little by little. A tree does not grow very rapidly. It produces fruit in its own season, in its own time. We cannot force it. The work that we do is ultimately God's work. The faithfulness that we exhibit, hopefully, is faithfulness to God and His will and His way, not our will and our way, not our timeline and how we would do things. And that's a call to holiness. Individual, personal holiness. To make sure that we know very, very clearly why we do the work that we do. Is it to save innocent human lives? Yes. Is it to save women from the pain of the choices of abortion? Absolutely yes. But ultimately, the reason we do what we do is because of who God is and what He calls us to be. We do this work because we are called to it by God, that we have received a message, a call to be faithful, a command to live the gospel, and we strive to the best of our ability, with all of our flaws, faults, and imperfections and sinfulness. We strive to be faithful to that which God calls us to be and that which God calls us to do. I pray that our time together today is a time to be renewed and refreshed and reinvigorated, a time to be a bit more restored in hope, a time when we can say, if I get discouraged, that's because I make it more about me than about God. And it's a call to holiness. And so let us today pray for one another, pray for our apostolate, pray for all those who do not yet see or accept the truth of the meaning and beauty of life. Pray for all those who spread a contrary message. But pray most especially that in doing the work that we do it fully and faithfully in accord with the mind and heart of Christ, that we seek first to do His will, to have that firm and deep foundation in Him and in what He asks us to do.